From cheater bots to OTA Knocks, Marvel snappers have a ton of hot takes. Let's get into it. Two-parter here. Second Dinner has done a good job since KO Gate, and it doesn't matter as it's easier to lose customers than gain them. I think both of these hot takes are close to objectively true. They have clearly learned what their mistakes were with Kid Omega, both in terms of what they were asking and how they were asking it. Kid Omega was a case of the first implementation of this kind of thing going catastrophically wrong, where the category of this kind of thing refers to event cards. This was sort of a flashpoint moment where Kid Omega had this massive price tag if you didn't want to engage in the event, and was not really functionally earnable free to play. And both of those were really big problems that they have fundamentally changed every event since, based on what I can figure out their learnings from that situation. So while it is very true that they have done a better job since KO Gate, and I suspect it is also very true that it matters a lot less now, I don't know if they would have done as good of a job with that stuff if the community didn't respond in the way that it did. I can't say that all of the communication from the community around Kid Omega was well thought out or put together in understandable ways or really all well put together at all. But what I can say is that I feel like a significant portion of the audience was just like, this is it, I'm done. And when a gaming company sees that happen, they do make some changes. And I think it's sort of easy to say, yes, they've done a good job since KO Gate. I think the harder question is, would they have done a good job since KO Gate if that didn't happen? And also, how did it happen in the first place? Because I think if you ask the community, a lot of this stuff is really obvious, right? Like there are things that won't be tolerated, and that is very clearly one of them. And I don't think it was impossible to know that going forward. So while it is good that they have gotten significantly better in the wake of a very large mistake, it's the kind of thing that you wish you didn't have to make the mistake to learn. You know what I mean? There are some things for which experience is required, and you got to make the mistakes in order to get better in the future. This is one of those where I'm not sure that's true, and it definitely has hurt them. Most modern issues people have with climbing to infinite, rigged matchmaking, cheater bots are imagined, but Second Dinner should make changes to address the perception problem. We're starting out 2 for 2 here. I absolutely agree with this as well, both premises. Premise number 1, a lot of what people complain about is fully made up. There was a guy who we'll probably get to later who was like, I will not accept any answer on rigged matchmaking other than that it exists. And that seems like the kind of thing where it's like, I don't know if that guy is reachable. But I would imagine that there are people who sort of soft believe in this stuff in a way that it is reachable. And the reason I think this stuff is sort of problematic for Second Dinner is not that I think they're doing anything wrong, but that I think the well is poisoned, such that if a bot does something to you that is beneficial for the bot, that could very easily just be, at this point, not cheating and just what a smart bot would do. But the fact is that we don't know. On my most recent Infinite climb, I had a whale of a time trying to figure out which bots were cheater bots and which bots were loser bots. That's not a fun thing to do, because there are bots that are programmed to lose, and there are bots that are programmed not to lose. And I don't really understand why the metagame of climbing to infinite is figure out if your opponent is a bot, and then make a guess as to which kind of bot they are. It's just too much of the behind the scenes has been exposed here. So much of the behind the scenes has been exposed and so much remains sort of under wraps that it's hard, that the whole thing becomes about what you don't know in those situations. And any reasonably good play from a bot immediately falls under suspicion of this bot was cheating. And I think that that is the largest problem, because we have no way to know that that is not happening. Like, they can say we don't have cheater bots in the exact same way that we used to. But what is the functional difference? Like, what is the difference in experience, and how can we trust that that's not happening? And I think it's just one of those things where it's like, the way they handled this early in Marvel Snap is like one of their greater communication missteps, where they like didn't admit it was a thing for a while, and that makes people feel like they're untrustworthy on the subject, right? I would compare this to matchmaking, where they've basically always told us exactly what's going on, which is there's a collection level aspect, and then there's a hidden MMR aspect, which is roughly represented by snap points when you get to infinite, but not exactly represented by snap points when you get to infinite. Those are things that are sufficient to sort of rig matchmaking in a way that you are going to get fair opponents most of the time and push your win rate towards 50%. That's happening, and they're very open about that. The bots is the thing they're not open about. And the fact that there's a combination of we know too much about it and we don't know enough about it. And I think they're caught in this middle where we know enough about it that people's imaginations are able to run wild in every single situation where they lose, but we don't know enough about it that we can concretely say that those people are actually wrong. And so there's this incredible vibe failure that is happening because of that. And I think that's the biggest thing that sticks out to me about why this hot take is true. Cards like Isan, 2/7 Ghost Rider, and some others that have condition for play or payoff aren't bad, and people have always been spoiled by seeing other big number cards get the win. I think this one undermines its own premise. People have been spoiled by seeing other cards win. When we talk about a card being bad, that's not an inherent quality of the card. That's a quality of the card in the current context of the metagame. Cards like First Ghost Rider and Isan aren't bad. They're not. There's no like stamp on them that says this card will always be dog shit. That's not how this works. They're not good. And the word for not good is bad. But I think when people talk about card game stuff, they think of it as like this very black and white thing. This card is good. This card is bad. When what it actually is like, I'll call a card good when me putting it in my deck raises the win rate of that deck by like 4%. And I'll call a card bad when me putting it in my deck lowers the win rate of that deck by like 4%, right? Like we're not talking about a massive black and white thing here. We're talking about the difference between 54% and 46%. We're talking about what is functionally a thing that you probably won't notice unless you are really trying to evaluate when you play the card, what would have happened if this was a different card? How am I meant to go about it? And that's how you have to play when you're doing card evaluations, right? Like, you need to think of counterfactuals. You need to think, is there a better option for this? You need to think, is there a worse option for this? What is the value I'm leaving on the table? What is my opportunity cost for playing this card? And a lot of those cards are cards with opportunity costs that are not justified by their payoffs, right? Like, that's what you get. When you look at the successful combo decks, what you see is cards with a high opportunity cost that are very justified by their payoffs. Deadpool obviously sucks if you draw it late, but it's extremely justified by playing it early and doubling. It's a 1/1. That's a very high opportunity cost, but it's a very high payoff. Human Torch is a 3/3, very high opportunity cost, very, very, very high payoff. So when you look at that kind of stuff and you say, what are the hoops I have to jump through in deck building to make this work? With both of those cards, with Isan and First Ghost Rider, they're pretty heavy. And then what are the payoffs that I'm getting out of it? When you look at these cards and you say that they are bad, it is only in the context of being relative to the other cards that have the same level of investment required, but vastly higher payoffs in terms of winning games of Marvel Snap. And so when people talk about these cards being bad, it's not a like quality judgment in the sense that I think it's being taken as. It's a contextual quality judgment where I think a lot of people will sort of, when they're first exploring this kind of terminology, do what this person is doing, and they'll say like, well, that card isn't bad. I can win games with that card. And that's not the point. The point is what you're putting into winning games with that card better than putting it into winning games with a different card? The deck building investment you're making to run Isan, is that the same kind of deck building investment you're making to play Move or Destroy? And if not, what is it that you are getting out of it that makes it worthwhile? Fundamentally, I'm dumbing down a pretty complex concept, but the good combo decks have a combination of relatively reasonable asks and very high payoffs. Cards like Isan and First Ghost Rider have very high asks and not nearly so big of the payoffs. Does that make any sense? People are expecting a Cerebro nerf next OTA after it won GGW, and Glenn said recently that Cerebro has been one of the strongest decks for a while. However, I think it's more likely that Cosmo and Super Giant get nerfed instead, with the direction SD has been handling card balance recently. I am not sure where the Super Giant comes in here. I think that's probably just like a, well, they're going to nerf whatever tech cards here thing. But I do think there is something that is important here, which is Cerebro, in theory, should have a pretty natural counter. This is a deck that is built on the idea of all of your cards having the same level of power. So in theory, what should be good against that is cards that change the amount of power your opponent's cards have. The reason this is not true is because Cerebro runs Luke Cage, which turns anyone trying to do that into a hapless chump tripping over their own shoelaces. If you want to seriously engage with Cerebro as a deck, and you don't necessarily want to nerf the card Cerebro, I do think that the stuff you have to start with is Luke Cage and Cosmo. Those are the major things that make this deck what it is. Cerebro's numbers are great. What really makes it what it is how impossible it is to meaningfully interact with it. Oh, you want a Cosmic Ghost Rider my Cerebro lane? Sorry, dude, I have a Cosmo. Oh, you want to afflict my cards so my Cerebro turns off? Sorry, dude, I have a Luke Cage. I don't have a good or meaningful solution to this. I would say, like, just make Luke Cage a 3-4 or a 3-5 or something and just call it a day. But I do think that, like, there's too much in this question being put into, like, the SD always nerf tech cards and not enough being put into, like, what are the actual problems with Cerebro? Because, like, yeah, you could solve the Cerebro problem by making it a terrible card. You could do that. But wouldn't it be more fun to make it a deck that actually has counters? I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Griffin confirmed that Spotlight bundles are releasing for all at $20, and people are upset about it, but are focused on the wrong thing. The community should really be upset with the fact that you have to unlock the card to see the bundle in the first place. The bundle should drop when the new cards do, without the need of buying the base card. IMO, $20 to unlock a newly released card would be the best deal in Snap, only comparable to the premium or super premium season pass. Well, yeah. I mean, like, yeah. I don't really... Okay, so fundamentally what this card is, the saying is like, they should sell us cards for $20. And it's like, you know, yeah, I think everyone would want that. Like, I think a lot of people would like, yeah, I don't want to engage with this, whatever, these 75 currency obfuscated system. It's just like, it doesn't really seem like it's related to the Spotlight bundles at all, right? Like, you're talking about this like it's a take on the Spotlight bundles. It's framed as if it's about the Spotlight bundles. No, this take is actually, they should just sell us cards for $20. It's like, okay, you know, yeah. Like, there's not really much I can say about that, right? Like, that, yeah, I too support the game being cheaper. That's not really what the conversation is about. The conversation about the Spotlight bundles is they started out doing these sort of gradations of bundles, right? We have the $5 bundle, we have the $10 bundle, and we have the $20 bundle, and then they stopped doing that and just made it the $20 bundle, right? And the response to this was like, we saw that players didn't like, you know, rolling bad, and it's like, okay, well, if your response is players don't like rolling bad, which was, to be clear, the $20 bundle, why would you make it so the only bundle they can now get is the bad one? Like, that's sort of the thing with those Spotlight bundles where it's like, okay, I realize that that is a justification that sounds correct and fair. However, your decision was not give everyone the $5 bundle. It was give everyone the $20 bundle. Because that one makes you more money, right? Like, that's the only thing I can assume looking at that is like, oh, well, let's just make this $20. And I realize that that is a reasonable financial way to approach things. But it does sort of, like, it's like, okay, there's a little bit being unsaid there, right? And I get that you don't say that because you're, you know, if you're Griffin, like, why would you come out there and say that, right? Like, it's a ridiculous thing to do. But I think that this gulf, this little bit of things that are unsaid, like, that's the kind of stuff that long-term breeds distrust in a player base. And I don't want to, like, backseat community manage here because Griffin, I'm sure, is aware of that. Like, this is not, like, he's much better than I am at this kind of stuff. But it was something that I saw, and I was like, you know, I wish it was, like, socially acceptable for him to give, like, the full answer there. You know what I mean? Like, I wish you could just say, like, Yeah, I mean, we looked at it and we didn't see that we were seeing any profits from giving you guys the $10 and the $5 bundles. So, I mean, like, look, if you're going to pay $20 for something, we should probably charge you $20 for something. Here's a picture of a supply and demand graph from Econ 101. Like, I know you can't say that, but I can't imagine that wasn't part of the thinking here. Like, it's just one of those things where it's like, I would love to be talked to like an adult. But I think if you talk to people like adults, sometimes they use your words as weapons against you because they don't want to behave like adults. And I feel for the comms team, just like it being in that position. OTAs and patches should be used to rein in bad metas, not be used to push players to a meta second dinner once. The last few seems to lift move cards and nerf move counters for this upcoming spider/move season. Tinfoil theory most content creators share. Well, look, there's a lot of things most content creators agree on that are pretty stupid. I mean, myself included, right? So let's start there. What I do think is interesting about this, though, is the implicit assumption that OTAs are meant to fix things rather than to create things. And I think that's dead wrong. I think it is absolutely a mistake to look at a game that has a balanced cadence like Marvel Snap and say, you should not use this to the fullest capability you can. Yeah, actually, all you should do is just like buff a bunch of cards that nobody plays, and then if there's nothing wrong with the metagame, you should just not do any changes. Because I think one thing that Marvel Snap has taught me, and we've seen this whenever they alter OTA cadence, is the thing Marvel Snap is the best at is being fluid. That is like, if you want to pitch someone on Marvel Snap as a card game, it's fast, and everything is always new. There's always new things to do. There's always new metagames to figure out. Everything moves very fast. If you immerse yourself in the flow, you will be carried downriver like on a wonderful tide of ever-changing things. To say that you should only use OTAs to correct it is to lock yourself into the mindset of balance changes on a non-digital card game. It is to lock yourself into that Magic the Gathering mindset where you only do bans if something's really a problem. But that doesn't matter in Marvel Snap, or at least it shouldn't if they fix their economy. This is the kind of thing where it's like, I think that they absolutely should do changes in every OTA that change the metagame, because you can't just look at it as like, oh, there's one metagame and, if something gets too big, we make it a little smaller. If something gets too big, we make it a little smaller. You have to do other things than that in order to maintain the constant flow of changes and content that drive this game. I think this is a very, very, like, if Marvel Snap started doing this, it would be one of the worst things they could do, short of reworking the economy to make it worse. Like, this is taking the strength of your game and turning it into a weakness, would be to apply this methodology to balance. Silver Surfer needs to give +3 to compete in this era of Snap. Compared to Cerebro, Surfer gives less of a buff, is harder to copy, and has much more available counterplay. Green stats are a pretty safe design space to put power into, demonstrated by the zombie package. I agree green stats are a safe place to put power into, but Silver Surfer is much less safe than the zombie package because the zombie package is green stats that are one guy. The Surfer, with the ability to distribute across all lanes in powerful ways, is going to be more dangerous. The thing about Surfer, where I think this comparison gets a little bit disingenuous, is like, it's easier to interact with Surfer than Cerebro. Is it? like let's zoom out here. Like, is it? Does Surfer have 70%? Does Surfer have a bunch of locations that instantly lose at the game? Like, I realize Cerebro is a difficult deck to interact with from the deck, but Cerebro also falls apart when there are two locations that interact with your power in a meaningful way, right? If you get Xandar Nidavellir, Cerebro loses the game. Like, that's kind of the premise, right? That is a big thing to ignore when you talk about it being less interactable. Yeah, Surfer doesn't have a loot cage that can prevent you from interacting with the stuff. Sure. But it does have the ability to play on a Xandar Nidavellir lane, and even to benefit from that, right? When you look at something like a Captain Carter, in a way that I don't think this comparison is really giving any weight to. I would bet that Cerebro would be quite happy to exchange many things for the fact that it instantly loses to a monster metropolis or a monster island, whichever one makes the 10, right? I would bet that they would be very okay with trading whatever card in the deck as it is currently constructed for that to not happen. Surfer is, like, let's just start at Surfer is much, much better than Cerebro. The premise here is that Surfer is worse. It gets to run more cards. It gets to have more cards in it that meaningfully interact with its opponents. It gets to be a better deck. Full stop. It does. Surfer is a better card than Cerebro if they both give the same amount of power. Now, if your argument is they should do that anyway, I think actually the fact that Cerebro's done this, I think that if you did that with Surfer, it would just be worse. Like, yeah, okay, you could Shadow King my guys, but like, we both know that there's a lot to be done priority-wise with that. I think that it is a lot safer, in as much as it is safe. To be clear, I don't think it's perfectly safe to do this. To give Cerebro this power than to give Surfer this power, because Cerebro is a much more limited deck. Surfer can be a lot of things, and in my humble opinion, would be significantly stronger than Cerebro if they both said. By a pretty wide margin, thanks to the other tools it is able to access. It just is not the same level of restriction. There are so many ridiculously good cards. The fact that just like Brood, for example, triples your buff. The card that, what's the card? Maverick that's coming out doubles your buff. Captain Carter multiplies your buff. These are all things that the good Cerebro decks don't really have access to. And that's not even to talk about like the other stuff, which is that like you don't have to play all threes in a deck like this. Surfer decks get Sarah, they get Galacta and Gwenpool when those are good. It's just a lot more of an open-ended package that is a lot harder to keep a lid on in terms of the things it can do. I get the appeal here. I just don't think it's remotely safer. I do think you could argue it's what Surfer needs to compete, but I don't think I would accept the argument that that would then be a good thing to do. Surfer has so many of these like small force multipliers that it gets for free that are just way better cards than stuff like Cerebro 3 gets for free. And you know how like Surfer like the Cerebro decks really change a lot based on like, you know, we had Cerebro 2 is really good because it was the Mercury Shadow King deck. Surfer just gets to be that whenever it wants to be. Like there's not a thing keeping those cards out of it. Earlier I pitched, you know, Luke Cage to like 3-5 to get it out of the Cerebro decks, right? Like Luke Cage to 4-6, get it out of the Cerebro decks. I don't think there would be as easy solutions for a 3 Surfer. Like I think Cerebro and Surfer, one of them is pretty clearly better than the other, and it ain't Cerebro. And while I do think it would make Surfer competitive, I also think it'd be a lot riskier to do that. The deck would probably, to me, I'll be clear, it'd be more fun to have that around. I think it's like a more fun and interactive kind of thing. But I don't think it would be safer. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. I've been KMBest. You've been phenomenal. And I will see you in the next one.